Whenever I'm lighting a scene, there are four main light passes that I take. The first pass is diegetic, or light sources that exist within the world. The second pass is ambient, or the color of shadows in the world. The third is bounce, or the color of light bouncing off of surfaces that themselves have color. And the fourth is aesthetic, or non-diegetic, which are lights that have no source in the real world, but make the shot look nice. So it may sound like stating the obvious, but before you begin lighting, you need to first understand what exactly you're lighting. In this particular example, I have set up a scene in the Madsen house from Life is Strange with 3 characters spread across 4 shots. Our first shot is an establishing wide shot showing the scene as a whole. Our second shot is a close-up of Joyce as she speaks to David, and then we have a shot of David responding, while we have a shot of Chloe trying to ignore all of them. So, as we can see across these 4 shots, we're going to need to light basically the entire first floor of this house. So, that is our goal of what we need to light, and with that in mind, we begin. As I stated up top, the first place that I begin with is with diegetic lighting. Diegetic simply means in the world, and so in this case, it means all the things that would be casting light in the world, such as these dome lights, the television, windows, sunlight coming from outside, etc. So with that being said, I'm just going to begin with this dome light right here. So I'm going to turn on the lighting. I'm going to add a new light, and then I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to drag the light onto the secondary camera, which allows me to pilot the light as if it were a camera. So now using holding down left click and using WASD and then Z and X to move up and down, I'm going to turn off the lighting. I'm going to place this where this dome light is. I'm going to move it into it just very slightly. And I'm going to point it straight down. I'm going to turn on the lighting. And then I'm going to make the FOV as wide as possible. I'm going to right-click the horizontal FOV and remap it to 175. You generally don't want to go any higher than that. Things get weird once you get close to 180. But by doing this, I can make this light be about as wide as I can manage it. I'm going to pull it up a little bit more. About right there. I'm going using S to back up, and you can see in this viewport right here, you can see the shadows get a bit weird. I'm going to place it about right there, get it as close up into the ceiling as I can without it getting strange. Now, because this is a very large glass dome, it's going to be casting a very diffuse lighting, and so I'm going to max out the radius. And then because this is an indoor lighting, they tend to have a very warm tone, and so I'm going to reduce the blue and the green. I generally do this stepping right here, and that gives it a nice yellow tone. Now I'm going to reduce the intensity until about right there maybe. I'm going to right-click my render settings and make sure that they are set to 128/32. This is a good starting point to see what your lighting looks like. And then whenever you're ready to preview what your lighting will look like, you can go from the motion editor, where you should be placing your lights, to the clip editor to let it settle. So we can see that that's a pretty good start right there. I don't like these lights being up above the fan, so I'm going to grab it and just move it down a little bit into about right there. There we go. That's looking a lot better. And now we're going to do the same for the rest of the diegetic lights in the scene. So we can see right here that this diegetic light, it's a bit close to this wall, and it causes a really unsavory shadow. So in this particular context, you are perfectly okay to fudge it a little bit. In this case, I'm just going to tilt it slightly away from that wall. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull it up a little bit. And then I'm just going to more like that. Fiddle with it a little bit more. That. And don't worry about this shadow right here. We're going to address that later. Right now, we're focusing just on diegetic light sources. There's one last light source I want to add, which is going to be the light from upstairs. You may not see it in any of these shots, but I'm going to add it anyways, just to be safe. For organizational purposes, I like to name everything, so I use not just light 1 to light 5, but you know exactly what they are. I'm going to do that quickly. And now that is all of the room lightings, we're going to add a sunlight coming through this window, because that is also a diegetic light. We're going to place the sun rather high up in the sky. And because it's a sunlight, we're going to give it volumetric so that it sort of has a thickness to it. We're going to increase the intensity and the noise, and then we're going to also give it a slight yellow hue. I like to group my volumetrics into their own group so I can easily see what is volumetric and what isn't. Place that at the top. So now that is our diegetic lighting, and as you can see, this is the bulk majority of our lighting, and it looks okay as it is. However, if we take a look at Chloe, for example, here, we got a lot of really nasty shadows, especially right here underneath her breasts, and then also here on David's legs and whatnot. So this is where the second lighting source, the ambient lighting, comes in. So I am going to add a new light. I'm going to drag it outside this group. I'm going to turn off the main lights group. So now this light is the only source. So for ambient lighting, the first thing I do is I disable shadows and I pull it outside the scene behind the camera. I then max out the max distance and the far Z attenuation so that it goes as far as it possibly can. I max out the FOV, and then I hit constant attenuation, just drag it. It doesn't matter how much you move it, any amount is all you need. And you can see this makes the light blindingly light. Next thing I will do is remap the intensity to go from going from 0 to 1000 to 0 to 5, with a default from 500 to a default of 1. Now drag this all the way to the left and bring it up until it's just a decent fill. And so basically all your ambient light is it's replacing the pitch black of your shadows with whatever color you end up choosing here. In the absence of all lighting, this is the light that will be there. I'm going to give it a very slight orange tone to fit the light tone of the room. And now I can turn on the lights. Now we can see that dark shadow right there and the dark shadow on David's legs are much less intense now. I can turn this off and you can see it. It makes a very stark difference. It's subtle, but it's very impressive. And importantly, observe how these dark shadows that I pointed out back here and on the ceiling, they get filled out very nicely with our ambient light. I'm going to rename that ambient. And much like volumetric lights, I like to group all of my unshadowed lights. I'll place that up above volumetrics. Next light that we're going to add is the underlight, or the bounce light. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the ambient light. I'm going to add a new light, turn off all of the other lights, disable shadows, and then I'm going to drag this underlight, as its name suggests, underneath the floor and have it point straight up. In this case, I'm going to bring it back a little bit so that the shadows it casts on Chloe's shirt is a little cleaner. We're just going to aim it this way. And then as before, we're going to max out the FOV, max out the radius, bring up the constant attenuation, remap the intensity, and bring it down. So now in this case, this is going to be a bounce light coming off of the floor, which is very, very blue in this particular instance. So we're going to give this underlight a blue tone. So reduce the red and the green to give it a nice blue tone. And we go ahead and we see how it settles out. And then we turn on the rest of the lights. And now we can see that once a really harsh shadow underneath Chloe's breasts there are very bright indeed. And indeed, we can turn that off. And you can see as that shadow is a bit sharp, turn off the ambient light. And it's very dark indeed. Turn on just the underlight. And you can see that already does a lot of work. And then the ambient sort of fills it all out. So now the last lighting pass to be done is the aesthetic lighting, also known as character lighting, shot-specific lighting, or non-diegetic lighting. However, that is a very intensive process, and it has to be done on a shot-by-shot basis. And as such, I'm going to split that into a second video, a part 2 to this one, so that people just looking for a high-level overview of the lighting process don't get daunted by the long runtime of this specific video. So go ahead and check the video description. The second part will be linked right there. They're both getting uploaded at the same time.